Pretty soon I'll be moving out of this house, and as you can see, I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of things that I need to address, but over here, I had to dismantle my little corner of consoles where I once had a PlayStation 2, a Super Nintendo, and a GameCube. I've put those things in boxes, and they're waiting to be brought to my new location, which is quite a ways away. And as I've looked at this room that you've probably seen me in a number of times at this point, I can't help but feel like I have centered so much of my life really around being surrounded by things that spark joy for me, things that make me feel happy or excited or passionate. And, the same can be said for, like these language study books that I have here. I have a couple different languages that I like over there that I've been working on, not nearly as much as Spanish and Portuguese. That's like the center of my world, right? I'm interested in Serbian too, but there's only so much time you have in one day. And when you're spending like 90% of your time on one language, which is what I'm doing with Spanish, you end that 10% that you spend on another language is going to have to go to something that you really like or find really important. But all of this is to say, even with doing that, right? The main activity that I do throughout the day, which is language learning, it's just another way of surrounding myself with stuff that I love because through consuming YouTube videos, TV shows, music, movies in my target language, some of which I had seen or heard before ever starting this journey last year, um, I'm really enveloping and immersing myself in this world that makes me feel passion beyond belief, a kind of really physical, intense happiness. And I think much the same could be said about all this stuff, the many nights that I spent up late grinding away in various games from various generations, the many, many years of my life that I spent doing that. And it just makes me think about the type of passion that I feel for all of my interests, really. And this has been a difficult thing to describe to other people because I think there are certain people out there in the world that do not feel this life affirming feeling when they get to engage in the same interests all the time. This this incredible appreciation for being alive, this intense euphoric happiness in response to one's own interests. I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that. So when you try to communicate to them what that's like, it's very difficult, right? Um, and piece by piece, I find myself trying to impart the feeling of what that's like onto others, or at least to explain it like verbally, but it's very difficult. Like, I wake up every day of my life feeling energetic and happy and ready to go, and like the entire world is mine. And there's a reason for that. It's because I'm in a stable environment with good people, because I am fed and can exercise, but most crucially, most importantly, because I center every single day of my life around deeply fulfilling interests of mine that I enjoy engaging in. First and foremost, language learning. That's what most of my time goes into. And it's difficult to describe this to people because I've had people say, well, you make this comparison between language learning and video games. You try to say that uh, these things are comparable for you. but I don't really get it. And then they'll go on to say, well, video games are easy and surely what you're doing is hard, right? And then I always counter, well, no, what I'm doing is not hard. What I am doing is actually the most easy thing that I could be doing because it is the thing that I most naturally gravitate to. It is the thing that everything in my body is telling me to do. In the same way that, there was a time when that's how I was with all the stuff in this room. That's how I was with all of my instruments. That's how I was with all my video games. That's how I was with all of my books. And I'm still interested in all of those things. My interest in that stuff never went away. I'm still able to perform in those various regions, regards, what have you. The difference is, as the years have gone on and I've spent more and more years engaging with those things, I've sort of seen myself, become more regimented in my passions. I've started to kind of segment my days and allocate my time in a way that more closely aligns both with what my goals are and what is most conducive to me feeling as good as possible right now. It's a weird thing because a lot of the games that I've liked the most have been very, very difficult. I was always into really difficult games and also games with like a complex history or meta behind them. And it wasn't just about playing the game and becoming good at it and beating it, but it was also about absorbing all of the lore and information around it, and also understanding what that game meant in the context of the genre it existed in, the company that developed it, and the console that it was on, as well as the time that it was released in. And so a lot of the games that I would play would also act as a kind of research project for me. Hold on. Let me just put this here. If I may. Okay. So a lot of them would act as a kind of research project for me. And I think this is a little different than how a lot of other people approach media, right? And as I've realized this, well, I'm not just now realizing this, I realized this a long time ago, but as I've come to accept this more from myself, I have to go back to something that I talked about in another video a very long time ago, which is that I am an autistically obsessed, aspiring expert. That is the glue that holds all of these different things together. The thing that makes all of these different subjects that I'm talking about in this video, whether it be video games, whether it be literature, whether it be world history, whether it be linguistics, whether it be politics or music or film or any of my other various interests. Not only do many of them relate to one another, oh yeah, as for technology, let's not forget about cameras, photography, and GNU Linux, all about that stuff. Not only do many of them relate to one another, but many of them have a skill curve, and many of them require doing massive amounts of research and consuming massive amounts of information to really scratch the surface of what they are. And part of me, I don't want to say deep down because that sort of implies that it's beneath the surface, but a part of me that is very big and that is very core to who I am has this deep, incessant, and undying desire to know as much as possible about as many things that catch my fancy, that really inspire that feeling in me as possible, right? I want to know everything about them. I want to be very good in these areas. I want to be someone who can tell you every fact about a thing. You know, my friends and my family have called me a walking encyclopedia throughout my life. And a lot of people go to me just with questions that they would have from Google because they know that I probably have the answer about that subject. And so, it's like when you spend so much of your time just obsessively consuming information about any number of things, right? You can be that store manual, like the glossary. Um, you can have that kind of knowledge. Um, I I don't really I don't really know how to describe what that's like to somebody, This aspiration to be an expert on various things that tug at the heartstrings. It's very deep. It's a very, very deep kind of resonant sort of feeling that just drives everything about everything that I do. And I can't imagine being unlike that. I can't imagine, not trying to spend all my time learning things and getting better at something. I would just go crazy. I would literally go crazy if I wasn't constantly learning new things. Um, I wouldn't be able to do it. And I live in a way now where I am actually allowed to do that, you know. And I had to think about this in this context where, I'm surrounded by passion, signs of my passion, and I want that to be more the case in the future. I've got so many books, I just don't have them on display. And maybe one day I'll have my own library. I'll have my own library, my own study that all of you guys can see me film in. I think that would be a pretty uh, cool thing to have.